10 months after Armstrong died, his wife Carol says she found this white bag high in a closet that she was clearing. CBS News space consultant Bill Harwood says the camera alone is worth up to $1 million.
Magnificent sight out here.
Boy, you're not afraid to face danger, are you?
I'm here.
On a windswept day, we went with Armstrong to an old Apollo launch pad at Kennedy Space Center to hear the story of one of man's greatest adventures. That July morning in 1969 when you came out and you gave that thumbs up, that was a very confident view you put on.
Yeah, it was a little bit of a sham, I admit.
Both the Soviets and the Americans were obsessed with getting a man into space. Neither was certain just what kind of person could be persuaded to take the trip. Prisoners were suggested. Soldiers, physicians. Finally, both sides chose pilots. They were accustomed to being closed up in small spaces and seemed to actually enjoy being away from the Earth's surface. 11 months after Sputnik, a brand new government agency, NASA, initiated contracts for the construction of a manned orbital spacecraft. President Eisenhower announced this project would be called Mercury.
Considering that the United States had not even put a man into orbit, the idea of rendezvousing two separate manned machines in lunar orbit was thought by many to be ludicrous. But the advantages were tempting.
America really got into the space race with the Gemini spacecraft, a two-man machine, the first with onboard navigation and guidance. That Gemini is a wonderful little machine. Using it, I was able to rendezvous with another satellite and make the first spacecraft docking.
Mr. Armstrong, Bart Sibrel, ABC Digital. Wanted to give you the opportunity to swear on the Bible that you walked on the moon. Will you put your left hand on the Bible and swear to God that you walked on the moon?
Mr. Sibrel.
Yes? If you really walked on the moon, why would you not do that? So why don't you just put the end to the record in the argument and put your hand on the Bible, swear to God you walked on the moon.
Mr. Sibrel, knowing you, that's probably a fake Bible.
The early simulations were universally done on analog computers. Digital machines of the time were far too slow for flight simulations in real time. Some lunar final approach simulations were performed in early 1964, but without the lunar gravity characteristics, they were of limited usefulness. There was no way we could predict what each of those flights would do. It was going to depend on the success and the accomplishments of each flight along the build-up period.
Neil Armstrong reported back when he received the good wishes. Thank you very much. We know it will be a good flight. From the Apollo 11 liftoff. All the second stage tanks now pressurized.
I should say that I thought we had a 90% chance of getting back safely to Earth on that flight, but only a 50-50 chance of making a successful landing on the first attempt. There's so many unknowns in that descending from lunar orbit down to the surface that had not been demonstrated yet by testing, and there was a big chance that we didn't understand something in there properly, and we had to abort and come back to Earth without landing.
But that's the spice that makes life worth living. There's little satisfaction in meeting easy goals. Little satisfaction in winning over an easy opponent. Little satisfaction in claiming a prize not fairly earned. So accept the problems. They're opportunities.
And I hope that our grandchildren at our age can look back and say, the 20th century was a century of advancement and improvement in technology. And the 21st century
was a century of advancement and improvement in human character. And that may just qualify us to, as humans from Earth, to sally forth and expand the human presence beyond Earth. Not to take with us our worst behavior, but rather to be accompanied by our best behavior.
I was most fortunate to be involved throughout the entire lunar flying development, beginning with the Lunar Research Test Vehicle proposed in 1961. I had the pleasure of flying every one of the machines, the helicopters, the X-14A, the LLRF, the ground-based simulators, the LLRD, the LLTV, the lunar module, and even the Weber ejection seat, the last not by choice. The first Apollo spacecraft was pressurized to 1 atmosphere with pure oxygen, a little over, and a spark ignited, and the crew was killed in the fire. It was a tragedy.
When it arrived at the 5th flight that we three were involved in, most all the work had been done. Most of the tough problems had been solved, and we could approach those with equanimity and confidence. Mike would say to us, to Buzz and I, take it easy, everything's fine. All this stuff is easy. Don't worry. And we didn't. So we were the final leg of a relay race. Every one of those previous relay participants deserves it as well or more than the three of us. And so I want to just say that in my heart, it's your medal, you guys, and thanks a lot.
On landing, of course, there was celebration that to a great extent I don't think's ever stopped. And ever since that time, there have been people who have claimed that never happened. And imagine that, after all of the effort and all the passion, that there are still people that would say that. What was your initial response to that when I talked to you? You said something fascinating about the number of people that were involved in that project.
Well, I don't recall what I said, but people love conspiracy theories. Yeah. I mean, they are very attractive. But it was never a concern to me because I know that one day somebody's going to go fly back up there and pick up that camera I left. And so that'll be sure that...
This camera is the camera that probably took some of the most significant images of the 20th century, I would think.
Images including the moment that man first walked on the moon.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
CBS News space consultant Bill Harwood says the camera alone is worth up to $1 million, but profiting from the moon was never Neil Armstrong.
Having this bag in his house with these items in it is certainly something that adds a little bit of insight into the man, and who knows, maybe it is something that he would stop and look at occasionally to remember that historic voyage.
Armstrong, as far as we know, never spoke of that bag ever again, not to his wife and not to his biographer. It suggests that this most famous man from this famous event kept a piece of this mission always close by and all to himself.
Today we have with us a group of students among America's best. To you we say, we have only completed a beginning. We leave you much that is undone. There are great ideas undiscovered, breakthroughs available to those who can remove one of truth's protective layers. There are places to go beyond belief. Those challenges are yours. In many fields, not the least of which is space, because there lies human destiny.